Welcome to the Tax Awareness Show. My name is Shillyboy Mothiba. I'm your host. On the next segment, we're going to look at what caught my attention with regard to the SARS results. Okay, we've seen SARS results. Here I've got the presentation from SARS. We also happened to attend the SARS results media briefing that took place on the 1st of April. And I mean, we need to congratulate SARS. It did amazingly well. 1.8 trillion was collected and against the estimate of 1.846 trillion. And what was collected was 1.855 trillion. Amazing. Well done to the commissioner and team at SARS. It's great to see that work is being done there. So you met the target, or rather even exceeded the target as revised by the Minister of Finance. Well done on that. And interesting part about active registered taxpayers across the board, be it personal income tax, trust, VAT payers, and is about 32 million, has increased as compared to when we entered the democratic government, which is just quite interesting. It's quite a lot of active registered taxes. So that's quite amazing. That's quite amazing. So, but also, what really that I wanted to share with you, it's also on the issue of the compliance revenue. Okay, maybe let's also look at that. So the compliance revenue program. So if you look at what has been collected of that 1.855 trillion that was collected, 301.5 billion was collected as a result of SARS enforcing compliance revenue program. What do we mean by that? And I wanna highlight that, because if you look at what SARS is actually going to be focusing on going forward, that will be of your interest. Okay. There are about 2468 initiatives that SARS actually embarked on to end up collecting what we call compliance revenue program. Risk management, debt collection, you've probably seen those calls, SMSs, SARS say pay us, and sometimes they even hire people who are debt collectors. SARS do that. So that is another form of that. Declaration compliance, large businesses and entities, targeted and focused compliance initiatives, syndicate tax and custom crimes, targeting on that, customs and exercise compliance, voluntary disclosure. Actually, I'm going to take you on the voluntary disclosure. I'll actually look at the legislation, what it says to you as a taxpayer when it comes to doing a voluntary disclosure program. That is very, very important, because it can save you a lot of penalties, can save you criminal charges if you actually go on and do a voluntary disclosure. But I'll take you through that. And I think it's section 2221, somewhere subsection 1. I'll look into the legislation there on Tax Administration Act. We can unpack that. So there's also declaration of compliance of provisional taxpayers. That's also something else. But if you look at 2023-2024, they had collected 260 billion, okay? And then versus 2024-2025 tax year, which is 301.5 billion. Okay. Now, there's a compound annual growth rate of about 15%. What SARS is actually, you and I can say, oh, SARS is doing amazing. But what the numbers are saying in terms of the metrics that SARS is using, SARS is uncomfortable with this growth of compliance revenue program, because it signals that there's a large non-compliance among taxpayers, which is quite interesting. I found that to be interesting. So they're saying there's a large number of non-compliance among taxpayers. In the main, what they call non-large business or non-large taxpayers. And that will include self-employed people, that will include high net worth individuals. So they feel that they are of the view that there's a high level of non-compliance, and they are going to focus in that as a result of this. So that tells them, the numbers tells them the story. And I'll share with you exactly that. So if you look at that, they are saying their compliance themes for going forward. So I'm just going to read what SARS is actually saying from the presenter. They say, in order to maximize revenue collection, several focus areas guide our work. So as I explained, that SARS is of the view that that particular 301.5 billion, it's actually, they're of the view that there's a non-compliance on non-large taxpayers or non-large business entities, be it SMEs, high net worth individuals sector. So they're going to zoom in that. Also trust, by the way. So one of the emphasis is that there's a high level of abuse of trust. People buy fancy things, expensive cars, expensive or high value properties, and they're sitting there, artworks and things like that. They're sitting in trust, but utilize and not actually also paying tax. Therefore, SARS is of that view that they're going to zoom in there going forward, 2025, 2026. So if you've got trust and if you're a high net worth individual and you're SMME, it's about time, as much as it was your obligation to do that previously. But if you haven't got your house in order, please get your house in order, because you don't want to find yourself being in lockerheads with SARS. I wouldn't want to face that. But equally so, if you look at exactly that, how do you go about that? You can go about that doing voluntary disclosure program. I'm going to take you through what voluntary disclosure program it entails and things like that. But I want to go back and look at what those areas of focus. So they're saying in order to reduce the balance sheet, meaning that they've got debtors in the balance sheet as SARS. So they're going to enforce or increase their debt cash collections, meaning that if you owe SARS right now, you need to start looking at paying SARS, because they're going to hit, and they're going to hit hard. And also abstaining returns. There are people that they've not submitted tax returns for years and years. They continue to operate. There are people who will just operate, and all they do, they submit tax returns as nil returns. That is going to get you into trouble. What is the solution for that? Voluntary disclosure program. Personally, I'll say do a voluntary disclosure, go to SARS, ask for forgiveness, and then find a way of paying you out. That's a tax debt that is due. Okay, so they're going to do that in order to reduce the balance sheet, meaning that the debtors books, they need to make sure that they collect that. Okay, we're going to see a lot of enforcement on that and going forward. And then also they are saying their tax gap themes. Okay, they're going to ensure that they tax base broadening, meaning that they'll bring more people into the tax space. I remember they mentioned that over 100,000 people are actually living large, earning more than R1 million, but not actually registered with SARS. So those are some of the identified areas. They're also looking at trying to bring informal economy into tax base. So that is going to be very interesting. I'd like to see that. But they're also focusing on international tax, digitalization, and then they're also focusing on trade-based money laundering, illicit financial flows, tobacco, fuel, gold. So they'll also be focusing on that. And they're also looking at trade mispricing and undervaluation fraud. They look into those e-commerce, focus on small parcels. Hey, you guys will shade in there. So good luck. And high net and high wealth, or rather high net worth individuals. So we have seen that. Actually, we actually started seeing that where SARS is actually, I think they call it the revenue augmentation. So where SARS will red flag you, especially high net worth individuals, and then they'll send this recon to say, tell us about this income that we're seeing in your bank account. So that's quite interesting to see what SARS is doing around that. So if you're a high net worth individual and you're also not being been doing the right thing when it comes to your taxes. It's about time to ensure that you do the right thing and you approach SARS or the tax experts like ourselves, and we sit down, we look into that. But equally so, they're looking at cryptocurrencies. I'm seeing there's a huge developments globally when that crypto is actually being recognized. So those people who have not been disclosing SARS to SARS about their cryptocurrencies, you better do that now because it's not going to be nice. And then, of course, syndicated tax and customs crime. And with all these, I actually seen recently, that's basically what they're going to be focusing on SARS as compliance themes. So all the best, SARS, and it's good because, the more SARS collect all these revenues, the broaden the tax base, perhaps will not be seeing these VAT rate increases and high increase, because that is basically not even the tax policy of the country. Because if you look at the tax policy of the country, it's that of broadening the tax base, right? Meaning that bring more people into the tax base, efficient tax administration. That's exactly what it means, and maintaining these lower rates. But because of exceptional circumstances, we've seen the VAT rate increase kicking in. So, I think that's what we need to applaud to our government, to say they've been consistent about the tax policy. It's just that certain spending requirements have pushed, or rather led them to actually increasing all these rates that you're seeing, the VAT rates and things like that. So we perhaps going to see that. And I think another thing to broaden the tax base could be doing away with some of the tax exemptions that are not really helping or assisting, or they're not meeting the intended objectives. So maybe that's another area that the Minister of Finance can also look into that, to ensure that they broaden the tax base as a result of that. So there's also issue of SARS digitalization transformation journey that is doing. And we've done also an episode around that, the VAT modernization. I see that he has listed number 7, modernization of VAT administration. So, and that's it. You can watch what we said. I had a session with Shannon Friedman from VAT modernization South Africa. So, and that's quite interesting. We want to see more speedily changes around that, because that can actually counter or close gaps on the VAT leakages. So I'm glad that is one of the programs that SARS is actually listing here. And they are going to prepare and upskill their staff to coexist with artificial intelligence, which is great, amazing. And a unique identity system with Department of Home Affairs, South African Reserve Bank rather, and other stakeholders to reduce identity fraud. Actually, SARS just entered into memorandum of understanding. Is it this week? I've seen this week or last week. SARS entered into a memorandum of understanding with other relevant, and I think they're already starting to do that, which is great. So we're going to see all these things being done. So yeah, so there's programs that SARS is doing that, and all these things are being done to strengthen and improve the efficiency, the administration efficiency. It's all been done to increase the tax revenue collections, so that the administration of thing, or rather the administration, tax administration, is actually improved. But in closing, around maybe the results, quite interesting how provinces actually performed. You're looking at the provinces that contribute a large to that 1.855 trillion revenue collection. Number 1 is doing amazing is Gauteng, as it's expected, is economic hub of the country, that it comes first. And then secondly, it's KZN. Yes, it's KZN. And then number 3 is Western Cape. That is coming there. So the top 3 largest contributor to the largest contributor to the tax revenue. It's actually Gauteng, and then comes KZN, and then comes Western Cape. Great. Okay, those provinces are the biggest contributors to our tax revenue collections. And the interesting part is about how diverse our country is when it comes to the sectors that contribute to our revenue collections, as compared to other African countries such as Mauritius, that is solely dependent on revenue. And this is quite very interesting. And I think it allows diversity, can allow us to stomach some of the changes that happens. I mean, if, for example, we were only relying on mining, you can see mining contrasted a lot. So we went down in terms of collecting from a mining sector, and as the industry is not doing well. But then that helped with other performing good performing sectors such as financial sector, insurance, real estate, which did extremely well. So diverse revenue sectors are amazing because it helps us to diversify our tax revenue collections there as compared to other African countries. Okay, so large businesses still continue to contribute around close to 600 billion of the 1.855 trillion. So that's quite a lot. So the large business tends to contribute there. Okay, so I think that is that from the presentation by SARS around the issue of their results. They did amazingly well, and we congratulate them for that. But I want to, earlier on, I mentioned the issue of voluntary disclosure program, because it's one of the areas that SARS is going to, when SARS is coming hard on collecting these debts, when SARS is coming hard to targeting high net worth individuals, SMME sector, you're going to find yourself in trouble. So I'll say, if you already know that you've done things wrong, and you are actually at the wrong side, I'll say, by the way, this is not an advice, but one of the things that you can consider is what you call voluntary disclosure program. Okay. So now, maybe let's look at that. It says qualification of a person. This is a Tax Administration Act, and I just want to share with you what that entails when it comes to voluntary disclosure program. Let's go in the definition. Okay, so typically someone that will do a voluntary disclosure program and undergo that is someone that defaulted. Okay, what does the defaulting means as the taxpayer? It says means the submission of inaccurate. So those who submitted 0, those who submitted 1 million instead of 10 million, that's inaccurate, incomplete information to SARS, or the failure to submit information, or the adoption of a tax position where such submission, non-submission, or adoption resulted in an understatement. Exactly that. So if you know that you defaulted, you know that you submitted information that is wrong to SARS. When SARS comes for those, or if for that matter you did not even submit, when SARS in that focus, as I alluded in this presentation, mentioning that they are going to be focusing exactly on that. So when they come, they're doing reducing their balance sheet, meaning that chasing those returns to be submitted, chasing those tested. It means that you could find yourself having defaulted, having not submitted the accurate information. Okay. Then let's look at section 226. Actually, it says qualification of a person subject to an audit or investigation. Maybe let's see. Okay. Section 227 rather. It says requirements for valid voluntary disclosure. The requirements for valid voluntary disclosure are that disclosure must be voluntary, involve a default which has not occurred within 5 years of the disclosure of a similar default. So meaning that if you have done you defaulted and you underwent a voluntary disclosure program in the last 5 years, you cannot now repeat a similar offense, which which is true. And there must be full and complete in all material respect. You must disclose every little information to SARS so that you are able to qualify for this and be made in the prescribed form and manner. So that is what you call what this it's all about. So it says a person may apply. Section 226 about the voluntary disclosure says, subsection 1 says, a person may apply whether in a personal, representative, withholding, or other capacity for a voluntary disclosure relief. Okay. If the person seeking relief has been given notice of commencement of an audit or criminal investigation into the affairs of the person, which has not been concluded and is related to the disclosed default, the disclosure of the default is regarded as not being voluntary for purpose of section 227, and unless senior SARS official is of the view, having regard to the circumstances and ambit of that. Okay, so what it basically this subsection 2 is saying of 226 is basically saying, once you've been notified that you've been subject to an audit or investigations, criminal investigation, you cannot go to SARS and say that, hang on, I'm actually, I'm actually coming to do voluntary disclosure. So that's why I'll say the sooner you if you know you're in the wrong, the sooner you do these things, the better. Okay. So that is that, and I mean you can go entire or part B of the Tax Administration Act. It actually deals with exactly that. Maybe let me look at what else it's actually interesting. Okay, so voluntary disclosure program section 229, it says, despite the provision of a tax act, SARS must, pursuant to the making of a voluntary disclosure by the applicant and the conclusion of voluntary disclosure agreement under section 230. These are the benefits of undergoing the voluntary disclosure program, by the way. It says, not pursue criminal prosecution for a tax offense arising from the default. Grant the relief in respect of an understatement penalty to the extent referred to in column 5 or 6 of the understatement penalty percentage table in section 223, and grant 100% relief in respect of administrative non-compliance penalty that was or may be imposed under Chapter 15 or penalty imposed under a tax act, excluding a penalty imposed under chapter or in terms of the tax act for the late submission of a return. So can you see? So there you've got a rights, you've got ways where you can look into this, and to make sure that if you know you're in the wrong, please ensure that you reach out to SARS and do the right thing, because if they reach out to you first, it might not actually be nice, and that could actually not be a good thing for you. Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty much the reason I'm raising this is because of exactly that SARS is actually trying to focus on reducing the balance sheet, meaning that they're going to chase their debt. They're going to chase those that have not been submitting the right information to them, including the tax returns. If you have not submitted those things, basically you've defaulted. Therefore, you could, like I said, Section 226 allows that. It says a person may apply, whether in personal, representative, withholding, or other capacity, for a voluntary disclosure relief. So you can do that. So that's pretty much that. You can do that. You can do the right thing and make sure that. So that's all what caught my attention in the world of tax. And you can share with me. And if you've got any questions, if you've seen other things that caught your attention in the world of tax that I may have missed them, you're more than welcome to share with me. You can email me at shillyboy@taxedu.co.za or shillyboy@thetaxawareness.co.za. Therefore, I'll then be able to interact. Or you can WhatsApp me on 074589643 rather 074589643. Then you can WhatsApp me if you've got any tax related issues that By the way, everything that we share on this episode, or rather in this on our show, shall not be considered as a tax advice. You're encouraged to engage any tax expert in the field of tax. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Shillyboy. I'm your host of the Tax Awareness Show. Good day.